everybody, and welcome to Biohubx Expert Corner. My name is Crystal Phillips, and I will be the host for today's show. And today we get to talk all about physical infrastructure for life sciences companies. So if you are a life sciences company and you are growing and you need some physical space, you are in the right channel here. And alongside with me are the experts on this topic, Jeff Hopper and Dr. Stephen Jones. So we can start with you, Jeff, to give us a little background on how on earth you went from commercial real estate to now running lab spaces for life sciences companies in Alberta.
Well, back in the day, I actually started at RBC, and while I was at RBC in the banking industry, I started buying multifamily homes back in Ontario. And when my wife and I moved out to Alberta, I realized that I didn't want to be in RBC anymore, and I wanted to be in real estate. And so I made the switch. So I got licensed back in 2013. And since then, I've really enjoyed working in all types of real estate. I had the pleasure of setting up a couple business centers here in Calgary, and eventually opened up my own brokerage. So I actually have an operating brokerage right now, along with operating as the executive director and co-founder of Biohubx. And it was really just by chance, the meeting with Bob and Tina Scientra. We had our kids were in the gym class together, and we started talking about Scientra and the challenges that Scientra was having exiting or they're operating in at the University of Calgary, and they're looking for their own space. And they actually had this idea of a biohub. And the hours that we spend watching our kids do gymnastics, we had lots of time to talk, and it really what they were describing was a business center for life science companies. And I thought, you know what, I can do that. I know how to do that. And so just for fun, we started looking at space, and the idea kind of grew from there.
I love that when stars unexpectedly align like that. Who would have thought?
Yes.
It's great to have you and Dr. Jones, because we are now talking about some pretty complex subjects, and that's the point of Biohubx Expert Corner, is to take these experts and be able to make this information accessible to people who are expanding and welcoming into this space of life sciences sector. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Jones, and maybe you can start with a bit of background and how you got involved with Biohubx.
Okay, so I started off in diagnostic microbiology, BSc in biomedical sciences, and decided that I love medical microbiology so much, I decided to move into a PhD in that area. So I did a PhD in medical microbiology about nosocomial pathogens or hospital bacteria on clinically relevant surfaces. Realized that a lot of these infections were occurring on clinically relevant biomaterials, so took the segue across into biomaterials and related testing, and so worked in that area in terms of regulatory testing and the requirements, to get those products to market through various types of testing. So my experience of working with Biohubx was when I heard about them, I came in to have a chat and sort of worked out, listened to what was going on and the exciting vision here for working with setting up the lab and all the tenant companies, and it's an exciting environment to be in.
Now I hope the audience is very exciting, knowing both of your backgrounds. This is a perfect example of what I call unlike minds. So people from completely different backgrounds with similar goals. I truly believe that's what it takes to get these big projects stood up. And speaking of these projects, Biohub 1 is already stood up and in place. Jeff, can you talk to us what it was like to set up Biohubx Space 1 up in Royal Oak in Calgary?
Well, I think at first it was difficult. It was a new concept, new company. We didn't have money, and I feel like that's exactly where a lot of these young companies are, where they've got this great idea, great technology, they're ready, they've got all the energy and the capability to execute, but there's some key things that people are missing. And so it was difficult. And but the one thing that we had in our model that we developed right from the beginning was that it really needed to be centered around the companies. And when you are in the business of supporting companies in ways that they need to be supported, it's kind of a win-win scenario. And whether we were going to get a facility or not, we had already had a group of people who were very supportive. They understood the ecosystem. They understood the challenges of small business. And so we just started supporting. And I think through that process, we started to gain a little bit of support. Our model as a not-for-profit was set up specifically as a not-for-profit so we could kind of execute on that mandate. We knew that as soon as if we had incorporated as a for-profit company, our motives might be tainted. And we also thought that as a not-for-profit, that we'd have the opportunity to get some public funding because we really felt like we wanted support not only from the private companies and industry, from government, but also from large industry players. And really then on comes the scene Jason Pincock, Dynalife Medical Labs, and Bob and Tina and Scientra was part of his accelerator up in Edmonton. And so we had a couple meetings with Jason, and he loved the idea. And obviously Dynalife at the time wasn't in Calgary. And it was the onset of COVID, and it just seemed like there was an opportunity for us to potentially partner together, and that's exactly what we did. And it was really the support of Jason who really kind of kicked things off for us and kind of helped us cross that kind of credibility barrier, and to kind of bring it back to the companies. That's kind of what they need to do as well. Is they need, you've got this great technology, but you need resources and you need support. And we found that that partnership with Dynalife Medical Labs and Jason was the support that we needed in order to kind of get us a spot at the table so we could have a conversation.
Love that. Sounds like you had to collect even more unlike minds.
Yes, we certainly did.
Now, Stephen, do you have anything to add to this about what is status quo for companies typically when they're starting a company and they're growing and need some space?
So I think one of the big things is when they go and set up their own building, it's a huge process. It's a very, very risky process because of all the factors that they have to take into consideration to set this up. I mean, I'll give you some idea. When I joined Biohubx and the Common Lab, which is part of our rapid validation program, had very old school sort of benching and everything, and it needed a renovation. It needed that modernization, and that's something that is you always have to consider when you're looking at these laboratory environments is the workflow, the open plan, and so on and so forth. Like I said, it's very risky when you go to open up your own laboratory like that.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And so, of course, I'd love to talk about Biohubx because the concept is quite unique because, like you said, Jeff, you are focusing on the company first. You understand those risks. You understand status quo and that maybe some of the challenges with status quo could be solved through a model like Biohubx. So could you describe a little bit more about how Biohubx solves some of those problems and makes it more accessible with leases and anything else?
Yeah. So the idea, our model is really to go out and build a facility, use public funds to kind of build this facility out. And what Steve was mentioning is the absolutely astronomical cost, not just of general construction, but to construct a lab. And anyone who's gone down that road, lease agreement aside in your monthly rent, what is it going to cost you to build this kind of purpose-built space? And the answer is it's going to be expensive. And whatever your estimate is, I've heard people say double it and then double it again, and then you might be in the ballpark. So the idea is that we can take large square footage, go and apply for and get access to public funding build out the space and create this kind of footprint in this fully functional lab, and then open it up and create opportunities for companies to come in and just use the lab. So there's this massive amount of CapEx that they don't need to spend in order to get access to this very functional biosafety level 2 lab. So that's one piece of it, is just being able to kind of or being able to create an opportunity where they can get into this space at a very, very low cost. So that, I guess that leads me into our agreements. And while we think we could easily ask for companies to have an annual kind of lease agreement or sublease agreement, we didn't want to even do that. And my experience in the business center environment is you can put those leases in place, but the reality is when someone moves their company into a kind of one of these shared model environments, and they go through the effort of landing their business, they're going to stay. Like they change their business cards, their corporate address. There is no very, very little flight risk for the facilities. And so one of the things that we do is we further reduce the risk for the companies by just creating a month-to-month agreement. And optically, it feels good for the companies. They don't feel like they're taking on any kind of long-term liability. And for us, it's really no different. The companies come and they stay for the term on a month-to-month, and they generally stay for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever that may be. So that's another way we lower the bar that you need to get access to this type of space. And I think the other part of it is if you were to go and build out your own space, there's a lot of things that like operations and support that you are required to run your own facility. And what the Biohubx team really does is take on a lot of that burden for the companies. So what I always say is if a company is a 3-person company in a research lab and they want to commercialize, we want to put them in a position where that same 3-person company can stay a 3-person company in their production facility and not kind of grow that footprint and the human footprint. And it's not that we don't want to discourage people from hiring people. They certainly will. But the idea is they need to be incredibly cash conservative, and they need to really run lean and operate lean. And if they can do that, and if they have a mechanism to do that, they're people who are investing in their companies. They really like that too. They like to see those investment dollars going not into bricks and mortar, not going into administrative staff, not going into lab support staff that are, checking fume hoods and calibrating equipment and things that have nothing to do with their technology. And that's where the Biohub team really supports that function and really the Biohubx team in the lab run by Dr. Steve Jones is really just to be an extension of those companies. And so we help and we support. And the idea is they can get in there with a very low bar, very low risk, and get operational and ideally get a product to market and get to revenue.
Yeah, and so Dr. Steve, let's get technical here. So we have the building, whether it's through Biohub or you're building your own space, your life science company. What are some really key considerations that may be otherwise overlooked or that you should make sure that are top of mind when you're starting?
Right. So I think I'm going to start off with the big 3 that I always think of when we're going into when you're planning out a lab, and start with the first one. There is power. Look at the power requirements for your for your equipment. Something like a mass spectrometer can basically be very, very hungry on the power front. So you have to sort of plan for that potential requirement, but also like from a plug requirements, because it requires that high voltage. It just requires a different plug, and you have to be ready for that arrangement. Secondly, water. Whatever system you're working in this type of area, you're going to need a water system. You're going to need a nice, good, certified, monitored water system. It's integral to all the work that we do. Thirdly, HVAC. Your air, your air quality, your air system. You need to have once again, a system that's well maintained, well monitored, and make sure that it's applicable for your application. So if like in a standard lab, you're looking at something like 6 air changes per hour for a standard, BSL2 lab. But if you're looking at maybe setting up a clean room down the way, you're going to need an ISO 7, ISO 7 or ISO 8. And ISO 7 is going to be, 60 air changes per hour. So you have to be aware of these potential considerations, that you need for your lab when you're planning this out. The other big thing here is the bench footprint. I think this is always one of my favorite things is when I'm looking at the bench footprint, it's like, plan it out. It's like it's all well and wonderful to bring in all this big, beautiful equipment, but plan it out, work out where it's going to go. Can you get something that is going to be smaller and efficient? In the lab here, we have a Biotech Citation C10. It's essentially a confocal microscope in a box. So instead of having a big confocal microscope that takes up, half your room, half your lab space, it's in this beautiful little box on the corner of the bench. So, consider your equipment. Consider if you can use something that can, be consolidated down and do multiple functions. The other thing to think about is the biosafety level. So what biosafety level are you going to be working with? So, for example, our lab here is a biosafety level 2 lab. If you're working with pathogens, look at the organisms that you're working with. Are they risk group 1? Are they risk group 2? Are they risk group 3? Now, risk group 3 is things like tuberculosis. So there's some very, very special requirements for that type of laboratory that needs to be addressed. If you're going into the manufacturing, if you're going into the biomanufacturing side of things, once again, space is absolutely, integral for this type of area, especially for manufacturing. You're going to bring in equipment, repeatedly, and we know companies that do that. They expand, they have the space, or they have this equipment in. It's like plan it out, make sure it's there. And finally, I think, in this type of areas, quality management. Quality management is absolutely, vital in this area. You have to sort of, take this into consideration when you're planning out the lab, and make sure that it's going to conform to the quality management system that you're using, whether it's a standard, ISO 9001 and ISO 13485, 17025, anything like that. Be aware, that you have, that you're planning around that point. So just to lead on from that, here at Biohubx, we have the rapid validation program, and we address a lot of these issues that I just mentioned that we have in places. That, for example, we monitor, the water system, we monitor, the HVAC system. We make sure everything is maintained. We make sure that the biosafety hoods are certified. We make sure fume hoods are certified. So we have everything in place that companies can come in, use the area, knowing that, there's a very good high quality system in to produce a paper trail showing that high quality data has been generated.
I knew you'd have a big answer to that. And I have so many follow-up questions, but I wanted to speak to you. You mentioned the ISO certifications and needing to do some front loading, so think ahead about what's required. Is that the same for when you need Health Canada, FDA approval, or is there something else that you need to think about in addition?
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of forward thinking. There's a lot of planning ahead. I mean, when I've taught and I've mentored people in the past, I've said, look, don't just think, one step ahead. Think 5 steps ahead, 6, 7 steps ahead. You have to be ready for any considerations that come through the door. I've worked with the FDA, on testing requirements, and I've been privy to those requests that come through last minute, and because the company that I was working with had not considered that, and so there's a bit of a mass panic to get the results generated.
And then do you find a difference between what you're thinking about and lab spaces that you're used to in academia versus in industry and once you're commercializing?
Oh, totally and utterly. One of the fun things, here at Biohubx, and when companies want to set up their own lab, is you have this carte blanche to how you approach things. You have a free reign to how you set up a quality management system. You write your SOPs, you implement your SOPs, you implement your whole processes. Academia, and I've been involved in this. You have to model your QMS system around what already exists within an academic environment. So if SOPs or policies or procedures exist for purchasing or facilities, you've got to work those into your procurement, your quality management framework. And part of the problem, and I'm speaking personal experience here, is it's been difficult. It was difficult to track down the right people to talk to get the right information. I recall talking to someone asking for an SOP on purchasing, and I said, "Is it online?" He went, "Oh no, it's sat in a folder in our office." And it's like, oh, right. Why is it not readily available? And that was part of the issue, was running around trying to find these people to get the relevant information from. When you're setting it up yourself, you don't have those issues. You work in-house, or you work with your QMS consultant to set it up.
Wow. And then how does your supply chain and vendors factor into planning your lab space?
Oh, right. One of the big things here. So I got to go right into you have an approved vendor list. That's part of your quality management system, is check, the websites for their relevant ISO to show that they're ISO 9001 or the relevant manufacturing certification. And I think one of the big things here, and it ties into the design of a lab, is I've only come across a few labs that have really, really nailed the storage capacity, the storage issue. It's like we all, you order in all these big boxes of like pipette tips or serological pipette tips or whatever. And I've only come across a few labs that have actually nailed the storage capacity issue there. Because everyone buys things in bulk, and you see all these big, beautiful cardboard boxes everywhere. That's a big thing to consider there, is that storage issue.
Oh, wow. Now, we talked about, okay, we've got the space, we've got the right equipment and settings in the space in the right order. Now, I like this next question because it's the case for many of the portfolio companies in the Thin Air Labs Fund, so I see it firsthand. What happens when these companies are now expanding and scaling? Jeff, can you speak to how they can manage this?
Yeah, I think, I think when you're at that point where you want to expand and scale, you have a number of options available to you. And I think from the companies that we've had lots of conversations with, I think it's expanding and scaling is a result of like projections and maybe some contracts and things like that. And at a very early stage, those contracts can come and go. And so we really, at Biohubx, we've designed our facility so that it can tolerate that expanding and contraction. And what I mean by that is, if you've got very lofty goals and you've just got some funding and you want to build out, a lab that's going to suit your needs for the next 5 years, you may want to go out and kind of build your own facility and be on your way. But we know from companies who have done that, sometimes that's not maybe the best thing to do. And what we really want to do is we want to give companies the opportunity to stage that. And it goes back to, I guess, where we sit in the ecosystem. And certainly when companies are very early on and they're forming, the academic environment is an ideal spot for them. And even when they can get to commercialization, like at the LSIH, lots of opportunity to commercialize there. What we really want is to be kind of that stepping stone. And so you can, as an example, with Biohubx, you can start with a virtual office package. So you can get a business address at Biohubx, or you can get bench time or rent a lab for a day or a week or a year, and really get access to the team and help and really draw on the knowledge of the team as well as everyone in the facility, so that we can help kind of formulate that pathway for you. And for the folks that are here and operating, if say one of the companies like Nanotest came to me and said, listen, we've just got a new project, we want to expand or we want to double our lab size, we built the lab in such a way that we can actually accommodate that. And while the Royal Oak facility is only 10,000 square feet, we've got plans for a much larger facility where we can really accommodate. So you can grow and contract in a space very fluidly, like on a month-to-month basis. And what you'll really enjoy compared to a conventional lease is that if you need to contract and you need to be kind of preserve cash because it's summertime and you're doing all R&D and you've turned off the production taps and you want to refocus and retool, that doesn't create massive liabilities on the company, and it doesn't in some cases create a life event ending event for the company because they need to contract and maybe they don't have that kind of revenue that they expected to come in. And so I think we provide a lot of that flexibility. And what we've also seen is there are companies that have gone out on their own that are now looking to get kind of, I use the word repatriated back into the ecosystem. And because in the lab environment, often you don't need massive amounts of lab space. What you need is very capable space. And with the with the opportunities to leverage robotics and things like that, in very small labs, you can actually accomplish a lot. And we've got several examples of companies that they're in 200 square foot lab, and they can ramp up from call it 10 widgets up to 10,000 widgets a month in that very same lab. It's just about changing that mindset. And what we really want to do is we want to de-risk it for the companies to a point where when they're ready to take on a 5 or a 10-year lease, that they don't see that lease as a liability. They see that lease as an asset, as something, because they're not concerned about shelling out $20 or $30 or $40,000 a month, because they've got the revenue streams in place, and they see that truly as an asset. And we can get into a little bit more of that a little bit later on, maybe with the questions. But the idea is that you can kind of baby step your way through this process. Because we have all seen and heard examples of companies charging towards market, and then boom, they realize that they didn't, they went the wrong pathway in some regulatory kind of journey, and basically everything kind of stops, and they've got to step back 6 months or a year, redo some things. Maybe they have to, whatever it is that you need to do. And we're really in a position to support companies, first to help make sure they don't make that mistake, because we do have a regulatory person on site, but also physically be in a position where you can kind of you can really bootstrap it while you're going through that process, and then live to kind of see another day.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And now, Dr. Jones, I'd love to go back to the lab and the bench side. Are there any potential missteps that you might have even seen that companies can make when designing and planning their lab?
Oh, it's truth, yes. Yeah, many. There's a lot. It's easy to make the mistakes. It truly is. I think one of my, the anecdotes I remember is basically a company bringing in a bit of equipment and hadn't actually measured whether it would actually fit in the freight elevator. So there was this panic of trying to work out how to get it up a floor or two, which was a problem. And the weight considerations. You always have to think about, planning out, the size of equipment. We all take it for granted. It's like, yes, we want this big, beautiful bit of equipment, but how are you going to get it into the lab? How many people are going to take to lift it? It's, we've had experience with that here with, people bringing in the biosafety cabinets, and you underestimate how heavy those things are. You have to have the right number of people to lift that thing up and help out with it. I think one of the things going back to going back to mentioning, planning out a lab is the power considerations again. Power considerations is a big thing for a lab. I mean, we have a sterilizer here, and we had to bring in, like an electrician to basically hook up the proper electrical line to basically get the sterilizer up and running. But it is a consideration that to get that sterilizer up and running, that you have to have the right power equipment. And I'll be honest as well, storage. I keep going back to this storage thing, and it really is a major point. It's like, make sure you have enough storage. Like I said, a lot of these boxes that get shipped in, with lab consumables are huge. And it's like, make sure you have a nice, organized system for it, and not a bunch of boxes. I mean, it's we see that. I've seen that in every single lab that I visited and been around. Certification. certification of equipment's another big one. Is, from a regulatory standpoint, that equipment needs to be certified. Make sure you have your certification schedule set up for it. Know the dates. These certification companies that come in and certify your BSCs and your fume hoods, they're busy companies. They have a lot of bits of equipment to certify, across the province. So the company we work with, they spoke to one of their representatives this week. He's in Winnipeg working. And so this is what I mean. It's like, book them in advance. If it's due on October 30th, make sure they're booked in 5 days before, because you've got to take in consideration that they are, busy people. I think the other thing is the biohazardous waste pickup. It's like, make sure that you have the schedule pickup. Know how much waste you're going to be generating out of your lab, because that waste needs to be picked up. And if it's older than 30 days, it's got to be refrigerated. It has to be stored. So you don't want that occurring. So make sure that you've got the schedules set up and you know how much you're going to generate over the course of a couple of weeks. All these points that we have just mentioned, is we handle that. We handle that here at Biohubx for our tenant companies and companies that come in to use the Common Lab as part of the Rapid Validation Program.
That's great. This is so much good information. I am glad there is a recording of this video so that we can watch it on repeat. And even if you've repeated a few things, it sounds like it's because it's very important for you to know ahead of time. So thank you both. And before we go on to future developments, which is exciting, I just wanted to address Ali's question about whether you have GMP level lab.
Okay. So currently, we do not have a GMP lab at the moment. However, we do work with companies to sort of, facilitate that GMP certifications.
And for my sake, and hopefully someone else's, what is a GMP lab?
Oh, it's a general manufacturing practice. It's a good manufacturing practice. It's basically a bunch of regulatory standards that ensure that your product is being developed and produced to a high standard. But like the good laboratory practice we have in practice in the lab here, it's just generating, you generate your product to a high standard and a high quality.
Yeah. Crystal, if I can jump in there,
Yeah.
There's just so many different requirements or kind of standards that you can meet in a lab, and certainly GMP is one of them. But what I will say, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is in other facilities, that's more of a possibility. We can talk about that here in a moment.
Well, since you said other facilities, I feel like that's a nice segue to future developments, because there was a very exciting announcement earlier this week. Jeff and Steve, either of you can speak to this. What are the plans for HUB Uxborough / Biohub expansion space?
Yes, thank you, Crystal. So we're very excited. We've been working actually since we opened, and when we were fully subscribed within just a few months opening, we realized that we had a problem and that we weren't going to have enough space. And so for an organization that was in the business of providing lab space and had none to give, we quickly had to kind of pivot towards programming and then figuring out what our kind of future lab space might look like. So we've recently signed a conditional contract with Western Securities, the developer of that beautiful development right across the road from the new Arthur Child Cancer Center. So we've secured the top 2 floors of the medical building, which is the one that's right on the Trans-Canada or 16th Ave. And we are actively working with a number of companies and designing that space out so we can take all the lessons that we've learned here and really take it to a whole new level in this very exciting facility. One entire floor will be dedicated to lab, which would be the top floor of the building, and just below it on the 7th floor, we've got office space, kind of state of the art, with everything that you would expect in kind of a Class A development.
Wow. Yeah, and for anyone curious what this looks like, there are already pictures flying around the internet, including on my LinkedIn, so you can check them out, and there's more to come. And Steve, could you speak to the lab side? What are your hopes and dreams for HUB Uxborough and the lab side?
Right. So I think one of the great things out of this is, like, instead of moving into an established building and a facility, we have the opportunity to design the lab space ourselves, based on the comments, and the feedback of our tenant companies as well. So we got, the lab is currently being designed to suit, their needs. They want to take on the liability of building and designing these labs, which is great, and so the facility will have, the capacity for the power, the weight considerations, like we said, for transporting equipment, up to the relevant floor through the freight elevator. And we'll have the space, I mentioned about storage, we'll have the space, to provide that. And the common lab will provide, multiple areas across, multiple disciplines within, the life sciences ecosystem for the companies.
Very exciting. Now, before we get into some Q&As, I'd like to be able to show you a little video teaser of Biohub Space 2 or HUB Uxborough. So Dana will be able to play this video shortly, and then we can have some Q&As after. Such
Wonderful.
a tease. It certainly is. Well, I had the opportunity to explore the inside down to the bones right now, but lots of plans in place, and it's very exciting. An incredible facility from the outside as well, with many cool plans above and beyond Biohubx that are very complementary. So yeah, stay tuned for more announcements on that through Biohubx, LinkedIn, and website. If anybody has any questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat. I have a couple here to start. One here, why do you choose to operate outside of institutions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because the institutions do really well at supporting the academic environment. And I think that for the companies that have experience working in those environments, they're really good at maturing those companies or that research and getting them to a point of commercialization. And for some companies, it's a really good opportunity to stay within that environment. But for other companies, maybe that don't have an affiliation with the university, or maybe they've got other reasons why they may want to operate in an independent facility. I think for each company, it can be a little bit different reasons. But certainly what we provide is kind of this IP-free, independent space. As a not-for-profit, we're here to support the companies. We don't take any IP. We support the companies the way that they need to be supported. And we really, we pride ourselves on being nimble and being quick and responsive, really working at the speed of the companies and the entrepreneurs that are running them. So it's really, I think all of those organizations, institutions, they have pros and cons to them. And certainly for the companies that we support, they're here for a reason. And I also invite you to reach out and talk to some of those companies and hear specifically what those reasons were, because most of them have come out of the academic environment. So yeah, that's probably a good way to answer that.
Okay.
And there's room for all of us. What we really want to do is we want to create options for the companies so that and I think that it's one of those things, we're just another option in the ecosystem. And the idea is that we really want to grow the ecosystem, and you just can't do that with providing one option in Calgary and one option in Edmonton. It really requires kind of involvement of a much larger ecosystem, and ideally, it's a scenario where when organizations like Biohubx thrive, and the LSIH and Health Cities, and all those other organizations, that we are actually just raising the tide for all boats.
I couldn't agree more. Well said, Jeff. So another question, what kind of lab work can you perform in the lab right now, and what equipment do you have?
Okay, on to me, not Jeff. So what we have in the lab is we can do a whole bunch of mammalian cell-based culture. So we can grow cells, mammalian cell cultures, do various assays in the lab. We can also perform a whole range of biocompatibility testing. So biocompatibility is a massive, massive step that's required for regulatory approval of biomedical devices, because these medical devices, before they get inserted into the body, we have to demonstrate that they're not going to sort of destroy the cells or the tissue around it. So we perform a whole bunch of cytotoxicity tests where we look at whether the medical device is killing mammalian cells. Blood compatibility is another big one. So all these big compatibility assays that we can do in the lab. We also provide services, simple services like expansion, growing of cells, storage at -80, and liquid nitrogen. We also to facilitate this, we have a couple of BSCs. We have 37-degree incubators. We have fume hood centrifuges. I mentioned it earlier today. The Biotech Citation C10 is a personal favorite. It's a confocal microscope in a box, but it's also a plate reader. So it's a bit of a workhorse bit of equipment, which is pretty darn good. We have gel docs, the ability to do electrophoresis and protein analysis. That's so we have a whole smorgasbord of equipment in the lab to get a whole bunch of testing done.
I like that. Well said. Okay, another question is, what makes you unique? I'm assuming they're talking about Biohubx specifically.
Well, I think what's unique is we have yet to find another organization like ourselves in the ecosystem. Most organizations that provide this very specific type of lab space and office space, they're either a part of an institution. Other versions we've seen have been sponsored by large companies, or they're some part of a for-profit accelerator or incubator. And again, each one of those, I think the ecosystem needs all of them, because I think each one of them can be the right fit for any one company. Like if you need capital and you need the support, and you want to head down, I want to focus on the technology, like then being a part of that accelerator can be a really positive experience and right for your company. And I think we are an option that we hadn't seen. And this not-for-profit, going out, getting public funds, building the facility, and partnering with industry is a piece that we haven't really talked about. But when you have an organization like, at the time, DynaLife, now APL, but if you're in the diagnostic space, this is the place where you want to be. Like you want to, and I should qualify that. If you're looking for reimbursement or you're looking for procurement, this is the place where you want to be, because the whole idea is that it doesn't matter if you're an early stage startup or whether you're a medium-sized company or you're big behemoth APL DynaLife. The idea that everyone in our ecosystem that we curate here has something to gain and something to give the ecosystem, and we really want to foster that. So the company who's maybe in the diagnostic space that's maybe a year ahead of you, they have 10 years of lessons learned that they can kind of give back to the earlier stage companies, and the industry partner, even themselves, like they provide a lot of credibility. They provide stability for the facility, but they also provide this vast amount of knowledge. And Jason Pincock at the time he said right out of the gate, if anyone in any of those companies needs access to anyone in my entire organization, you make the ask. And I can tell you, and I think Crystal was involved in some of this, we made that ask. And while it wasn't, direct meetings with Jason, it was with his executive team, with his team that worked on the lab testing process and how the process works. And we had lots of those kinds of conversations that really support those companies, and really get industry kind of knowledge, because I've been on calls with Dr. Tina Rinker, the CSO of Scientra and founder, and she's had conversations with companies, and they've learned just so much on a 1 hour call, and actually help these companies completely change the direction that they're moving. Because she said, hey, listen, I know you want to get to the US market. I know that's the big behemoth, but you need to do a lot of things here, and you can do it here in a very safe way. And here's what the pathway looks like. You go down this path. If you can execute in Canada, in Alberta, on this pathway and get your test to, say, a lab developed test and get it approved, you've done 90% of the work that you're going to need to get in the States, but you've done it in a very controlled and safe environment, in a very cash efficient way. And once you've done all that, then you're ready to go tackle the behemoth. And guess what? We have those expertise to help you engage and go the FDA route and the CLIA/COLA kind of pathway. So that's the value that we really provide here.
Okay, love that. Now, I have a challenge for both of you. With time running out and a few questions still rolling in, I'm going to ask you to answer as quickly as you can. And if there's anything else that we can share, we've got your names and your questions, and we can email further information later. The first one is from Lisa. Is there something that didn't work at Biohubx that you learned and had to change or will do differently at HUB Uxborough?
I'll just go one quick comment on that. Microbiology.
Okay.
I'd like to do microbiology. That was the one thing, because of certain accreditations here, it's difficult to do microbiology. So microbiology, HUB Uxborough, watch the space.
Love it. Okay. Now, from Myrna, how does Biohubx work with the other partners of the ecosystem? You spoke to this a little bit, Jeff. She specifically mentioned LSIH, Innovate Calgary, API, ACAD.
How we work, in a nutshell, is collaboratively. Nothing we want to do is to replicate or duplicate. What we want is to, if you're an early stage company and you're at the university and you want to learn about Biohubx, talk to us. We'll help kind of show you one of the potential pathways. And really what we found is when people know about what that pathway looks like, they can start to plan, they get excited, they don't get kind of in their own head and fear the unknown. Because what we really want is companies to be bold. And we don't want them to be bold and reckless. We want them just to be bold because they've been empowered by knowledge and they know what the pathway looks like.
Okay. Ali has another one. This one's for you, Dr. Jones. Wonder if the tests are in the GLP level. How about animal studies? Do you have any animal facilities?
So yes, we do the biocompatibility test at the GLP level. No, we currently do not have animal facilities, but we do have partners that we can work with for this.
Got it. Thank you. Very concise. Okay, last question. Thanks to you all. So many startups forget that to translate to commercialization, the actual space is also part of the accreditation process. And a massive thank you to providing a space where diagnostic translation can really occur. That obviously wasn't a question, but thank you. I didn't have time to read it ahead of time, but thank you for the kind words. We totally agree. Yeah. Now, I have one last question. If people are interested in getting a part of HUB Uxborough, what is the next step?
It's really, really easy. Pick up the phone and call us. If you go to our website, you'll see a contact us form. And we'd love to talk to anyone who has some interest. And keep in mind, we're not just looking to talk to people who are physically going to take space. We want to make sure people understand what it is, how it can be used. We have opportunities for day use, virtual use where you can just have it as a business address. And we can rent benches. We have so many. We're intended to be completely flexible and support the companies the way that they want to be supported, not the way that we've designed our system and you got to fit in our box. It's not the way that we've designed our business model.
Love that. Okay, so very easy. If you have any other questions or want to be involved with HUB Uxborough, please go on the website and reach out to the Biohubx team, and their contact information is on the website. We covered a lot of points in this interview. Again, this is recorded, thank goodness, for if you want to listen to this again, anywhere from leasing to lab equipment to making sure you have the right energy capabilities for your buildings and everything in between. Thank you so much, Jeff and Dr. Stephen Jones, for your time today and your expertise and being willing to share this with the greater community. I think that's a perfect example of how much we do want to work collaboratively and make sure that we are building this ecosystem together, because relatively speaking, especially in Alberta, this is a new emerging sector beyond academia, and where it sounds like we're doing it the right way and everyone's working together and wants the same outcome. So it's great to see this and to be a part of it. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to this and also engaging with your great questions. Have a great day, and thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.